Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I wanted to talk to you about something quite specific today, because frankly I don't have the time I need to go through and finish Yakuza 5 to a point where I'd be comfortable in doing a full video on it. But there's always one thing that I do when I start up Yakuza 5. I've done this 3 times, this is the 3rd, and that is every time that I start a new game in Yakuza 5, I always go for the taxi driving minigame. And then I do that for nothing but 2 hours, because I really enjoy this minigame. And I was a little bit worried after I decided to play this after having played, say, Yakuza Like a Dragon, because so many people liked Yakuza Like a Dragon, while I almost hated Yakuza Like a Dragon. The only thing that was really saving it for me was Ichiban, the protagonist. So I look at this minigame and I go, what is it about this minigame that appeals to me so much? And I believe I've figured it out on a multitude of different levels, because this game is actually quite in-depth. So, the basics of taxi driving are actually somewhat complicated, and for someone who hasn't actually, paid attention to the road rules, imagine a 10-year-old picking this up. Can't imagine that a 10-year-old will pick up Yakuza 5, but just hang with me here. They probably wouldn't know half of the intricacies that you would need to do in this game. So, while there's no such thing like a speed limit, there are a couple of other things that they've added on top to kind of balance the fact that you're driving an actual car on an actual road. So, not only do you have to be careful not to suddenly accelerate or suddenly brake and make your customer uncomfortable, and thankfully analog triggers do work for this, even on my DualSense, which I was using to play this, but you also have to use your turn signals. You have to brake at red lights. You have to make sure you don't run up the arse of some poor dude, and you have to make sure that you don't run over some pedestrians who apparently have zero sense of self-preservation and decide to just run out and just slam themselves over the top of your car. Because the pedestrians in this game are that bad, trust me, there's some footage in here that you'll see that they'll do that. And you've also got turn signals. So there are a lot of, minor things that you need to do, and a lot of just things that are interesting to me personally, because it's impressive that they would put so much effort into recreating a driving taxi on Japanese city streets simulator. Because it sounds like something that should be really boring in the long run, right? It sounds like something that should be an absolute bore, but it's not. Because all of these mechanics come together in just the right amount of ways in order to keep it interesting. And as a result, as a minigame, it's quite in-depth and quite fun to play. And even then, you have the ability to drive around freely without worrying about any particular mission. You can just hop in the taxi and just have a drive around the city, and you'll even earn points for following the rules. And I do quite appreciate that, because it really is just kind of fun, just wandering around. It's a shame there aren't, procedurally generated fares, but oh well, I'll take it. But there is a second side to this as well, and that's the Yakuza side of things, because as we all know, well, as we should know anyway, I hope you'd be sticking around for this long if you haven't played Yakuza at this point, but of course, it's the main man in the middle. That's Kazuma Kiryu, the taxi driver, the 4th chairman, the Dragon of Dojima. He is a very interesting man, very moral, he's very likely to stand up for someone in trouble, and he has the sense of honor of a freaking, what would you call it? A bloody Japanese samurai. He's kind of ridiculous in that he's really honorable about what he's supposed to say and do. If anything, that just makes him a more likable character. The thing about the Yakuza games is that, especially in the side stories, they tend to just kind of toss Kazuma Kiryu into a bunch of ridiculous situations and see how his demeanor, his honor, and his general character holds up under pressure from a million different kinds of situations. And while he doesn't get that opportunity very much in this game, mainly because his sections are rather short, because he's still got 3 other parts to go through, at the same time, the developers must have thought to themselves, what's the best way we can do what Kazuma Kiryu does best? Have him talking to a bunch of weird people about a bunch of weird things and imparting his advice and exhibiting his personality? Put him in a profession where he's required to talk to a lot of people and do a lot of weird things. Thankfully, this does include beating people up from time to time, which I've included for posterity, of course. But still, it is like the absolutely perfect excuse to get Kazuma Kiryu out there talking to a bunch of weird people, doing a bunch of off-the-kilter things, while still trying to maintain the rules of the road. Actually trying to do his job properly, because he's kind of in hiding from the life that wants to track him down so much. So he wants to be a law-abiding citizen as much as possible, but it just keeps drawing him back in. So as a result, you have him talking to a bunch of people, running into a bunch of situations, and often beating the crap out of a few dudes. Nothing wrong with that. But, including the regular situation you just saw here, which is just, you take on a taxi job, you end up talking to a person, and you have to make the sort of correct decision in order to come out of it on top, which I clearly failed to do. But there's also a mechanic, while you're driving the actual taxi, about talking to people. They'll put you a question, and you have to answer. And you have to pick the right answer, not only under pressure, but while you're still driving. And it gives this minigame just that little bit of extra edge, because you think, okay, I'll keep my eyes on the road, I'll just make sure that I don't run into anybody, that's fine. But then you just get that little extra pinch of salt on top, which is, you need to pay attention to what the customer's saying at the same time, and everything becomes just that slightly bit more challenging, and it's great. As a result, it makes the taxi driving one of the most memorable things about this, because not only is it mechanically complex, not only does it take some actual time to master, it shows off Kazuma Kiryu all his positive points and gives you a little bit of fun stuff to do at the same time. Whether it be beating the crap out of people, saying the silly responses, or just driving a taxi around a beautifully represented high-rise section of Tokyo. It actually might be a different city. I'd be lying if I said I knew where this was. Actually, this is Fukuoka. Fukuoka or something like that, isn't it? I admit I do not know how to pronounce Japanese. But there's another reason that I really like this as well. There are some really minor things that the game does which just really makes you appreciate it all the more. Whether it be that little thing up there that alerts you to the presence of a signal, but doesn't tell you whether or not that signal is red or green, so you're still able to look at it. Or how you're coming up on parking on someone, and it realizes that you're about to come to a stop behind another car, and the camera slowly rises upwards to give you an idea of how close you are to the car, so it's easier to park. There are all sorts of these little details hidden around the mainline Yakuza games, and this game just shows off all those little details in a way that I really appreciate. Because, man, I really do love all those little details. The mainline series is definitely where they put a lot of thought and care into how some of these situations turn out. There are some examples of this not going very well, however. Mainly that the pedestrians seem to have no sense of self-preservation whatsoever. They can cross the road in front of you, sometimes without warning, and this can get to the point where you're halfway across the pedestrian crossing, and the pedestrian will think, oh no, I've got to get across before he goes in front of me. He'll run into your freaking passenger side door, and you'll still get penalized for it. This can absolutely drive you insane. Especially on one particular mission, where you need to tail another car for an undercover police detective, and this police detective, you need to stay within a certain distance. And then the pedestrians are like, oh, I'm going to choose this time to cross the crosswalk to keep him well behind him. And then you'll lose sight of the car and you won't be able to follow it. This happens to me like 3 or 4 times before I'm able to pass this mission. And by the 3rd time I was yelling at the goddamn screen because these pedestrians just seem really, really stupid. And I could not tell you why. Like, the ones I get are the ones that the game kind of alerts you to with the little icons off to the side, where they run ahead of you well ahead of time, out from behind cover, and it's not on a pedestrian crossing. And those are the ones you really have to keep an eye on, right? But then you've just got, like, 3 people running into the side of your car when you're already halfway over the pedestrian crossing, and it's like, jump off the side of the railing into the river, please, because you are completely useless. There are also a couple of other things that caught my fancy. One is that notably, there are less missions where you actually, like, drive a fare as opposed to just driving a dude throughout the city, but it's just an entire conversation where you have plenty of time to pick your responses. I don't know why these weren't, like, actual fares you could drive throughout the city, even if they were easier ones. Like, sure, they're decent enough as they are. Give you an idea of what Kazuma's like in a shortened sort of sense for those people who haven't played the last 5 Yakuza games before this point. Was it 5? No, 0 came out after 5. My mistake. So, yeah, I get that, but it's still a bit disappointing that there are so few jobs where you actually drive around in the taxi. It's like a 2/3 ratio to just conversations to 1/3 ratio of just of doing the actual taxi driving, which is a little bit disappointing. And there's one little detail which really caught me off guard when I noticed it, because it's actually quite quiet, and thankfully there's like no voice acting in this mode, so I was actually able to hear it, but it really did just make me laugh a little bit when I noticed it. So half the time when you hop in the car, and it's going to be a discussion where you are just talking to a person, and you're not actually going to be driving the taxi, the radio will be on. You know what plays on the radio? Kazuma singing Baka Mitai. I don't know if this is on purpose. I don't know if they changed that in the remaster because of the meme, or if that's just something that happened, and it just looks even weirder now because Baka Mitai has become kind of a meme. But at the same time, even when you don't consider those, it's just kind of weird to consider the fact that Kazuma will be happily sitting there listening to himself sing a song and wonder that that's not weird. Especially since it happens like 15 times. Because it's like an 80% chance of it being the song that's playing when you first start up the conversation in the taxi. And it's kind of hilarious. I don't know, I just thought that was funny. Probably might not be funny to the rest of you, but I thought it was a laugh. I will also kind of take a little bit of a negative position on the way that the game balances out the discussions and the just actual taxi driving missions. Because when I was playing this, and the other 2 times that I've played this, I would just immediately go for the first mission on the list. You start out with like 6 or 7, and then you can go straight on through to that mission in particular. But I would always just go down to the first one and just immediately select it. And as a result, I did all of the missions that involve you actually driving a fare really quickly, and then all the rest were just conversations. If there were a way to like randomize it so that you had just a random balance of taxi driving and just conversations as you were going through, it'd be okay. I'd still enjoy more fares just in general, but I suppose there's not much you can do about it, really. I do also appreciate that they actually break it up every now and again, so it'll be just like a regular taxi fare, and then it'll turn into a fight, or it'll turn into a discussion, or it'll turn into a freaking highway chase race, and you'll be able to see some footage of that as you go along in this video. But there is one other thing that I would like to point out, and I can't believe it took me 3 plays of this mode to notice it. But you're actually given a little description about who you're about to get into the car with before you select the mission you actually go on to do it. And it sounds like it was given to you from the lady who was sitting at the counter manning the taxi phone. It's just a really neat little detail. It's not something I noticed my first 2 times through. But it's great. And again, it just goes to show the amount of little things that goes into a game like this. And yeah, as I said before, it's a PS3 port. It runs on toasters. My copy of the game ran fine. It automatically set all the graphics settings to Ultra. I do wish there was a bit more of a draw distance, especially when it comes to like cars and pedestrians on the street. But whatever, not really a big deal. Still looks and runs great, despite the fact that, again, I accidentally rendered this video at 30 frames a second. Thanks, The Medium. Not only were you a bad game and it felt like a waste of my time, you accidentally resulted in me recording this in 30 frames per second as well. But yeah, it runs fine. 60 frames a second all the way through that I've played so far, although I've basically got no more time to play it, because it's going to be a really busy week for me. I mean, that's pretty much all I've got to say. Yakuza 5 is, like, worth it for all the stuff that it gives you. The Yakuza Remastered bundle is worth it for all the stuff that it gives you, because it's like, they released it at a discounted price, so it's not even like 60 bucks American for the whole thing, it's like 40. So for me, it was like $60 Australian, and I was more than happy to buy all 3 of these games for a third goddamn time at that price, because they're all great. Yakuza 3 is probably my favorite of the 3, just because of the way that it shows Kazuma as a more relaxed family man, alongside the Yakuza destroying monster of a hand-to-hand fighter that he is. Yakuza 4 is just one of those kind of anomalies, but it's still fun. And Yakuza 5, it's probably got the most gameplay variety of the entire series. There is so much stuff to do. A main run-through of this story goes for like 40, 50 hours. And that's without going for all the side content. Trust me, I tried. Back when I first tried to play this on PS3 before Yakuza 6 came out, my PS3 broke after like 40 hours of this game because I kept getting distracted by idle dance battles and hunting up in the mountains and driving taxis around. Can't say there's nothing to do in these. But yeah, absolutely worth your time to buy. And I absolutely do not regret the 60 bucks I paid in order to do like 2 hours of taxi missions and then have to put the game down because I've got more stuff to do this week. Unfortunate for me. Oh well, I'll let you watch some more of me driving around some taxis. There'll be some more high-speed street racing soon, I promise. But for now, this has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.
到着しました。はい。え？はい。はい。 が混んでるな。到着しました。ははは。はい。はい。追いついてみせる。止められるもんなら止めてみろ。止まってみえるぜ。うわっ、口だけだな。うわっ、タクシードライバー舐めてると怪我するぜ。うわっ、